Kathy Kelly, revered and respected peace activist for decades. Thanks for taking some time to chat with me, Kathy.
Oh, well, thank you, Roger. It's always good to chat with you, and thank you for the invitation.
I know you have a lot of close relationships with people there. Tell me about what you know and what you can share with people, and what, if anything, people can do to be helpful.
Hmm. Well, what I know is that at least 35 youngsters believe they're at severe, severe risk and are extremely anxious to leave Afghanistan. So much so that they finally, in the last several nights, have just took off for various borders, which is also a very dangerous thing to do. They, in a sense, the ones that I've been welcomed by over the years with wonderful hospitality. They shared everything they had and gave us a glimpse into their lives and the lives of their families because they were volunteers, really because of their idealism and their altruism. They didn't take salaries. They received quite a good deal of money from very generous people in the United States, and they developed projects to help people needier than they were, the widows who were saying, I can't feed my children. Many of those women were invited to make big, heavy blankets, which almost every woman in the rural areas of Afghanistan knows how to do. And then those blankets, the women were paid a minimum wage, and the blankets were given for free to people living in refugee camps. It was a brilliant project. And, these kids were shivering out in the cold, distributing the blankets, going up icy mountain roads, trying to find out who were the most vulnerable widows living up near the mountaintops. I mean, they really taught me so much about living simply and sharing resources and finding realistic alternatives to war. But because they didn't have connections to USAID or large NGOs that might have paid them a wage if they'd known about them, possibly, I don't know, but they didn't have those connections, and so they're not on anybody's list to exit the country. But they are known in their neighborhoods, even in their home provinces, as people who've had lots of connectivity with Westerners. So they are very, very frightened. What can we do? I think that education remains crucial. It sounds like such an armchair sort of thing, but I've noticed that, in the last, I guess, 2 weeks, almost 2 weeks, there's been far more attention paid to Afghanistan than was paid over the last 20 years. And so I think we need to keep on educating ourselves about what the realities have been for people in Afghanistan all through these years of US war and occupation. It's just not true to say that the lives of people have been made better in cities, amongst some that would be true. But for the majority of women and children in Afghanistan, they have suffered through malnutrition, serious malnutrition, anemia, drought, lack of clean water, livelihoods just not being available, and therefore tremendous bereavement as young men went off to find work carrying a gun for one warlord or another, and sometimes came back wounded or maimed or traumatized for life, as often happens with the United States veterans of combat. And then they're even less able to find work. So Afghanistan is a country with a very sturdy and I believe quite beautiful population with an extraordinary history. But the years of occupation and bombing and displacement, bereavement, rising rates of impoverishment have made it a very, very difficult place to live. This isn't news to US elected officials if they've been reading the communications from the Special Inspector General on Afghan Reconstruction. And so it's very hard to hear that the United States Air Force is seeking and will probably get $10 billion in order to be ready to launch beyond the horizon airstrikes and drone surveillance in the future. It's disappointing to know that the United States is still rerouting money now that can't go to the Afghan government because the Afghan government has disappeared. But now they're trying to figure out, well, how can we place that money in other military programs that we have control over? Because who benefits from that? Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, General Electric, General Dynamics, those groups that have always been, pardon me, but like pigs at the trough, trying to get as much as they can for themselves.
Are you hearing from some people that you know?
Well, I have been hearing every day from people I know through a plethora of social media, a bit beyond my pay grade, really, but in WhatsApp phone calls and Facebook messages. People have been sending their documents and screenshots and begging, please, can you get me on a list? And it's very hard to say, even if you get on a list, you won't likely get responses until 18 to 24 months from now. That's the backup. And I think that's also extraordinary. I mean, there were some pretty hefty groups 2 years ago trying to beg the US State Department, get to work and, getting the interpreters and the cooks and the special commandos, get those people out. And it went at a glacial pace. But I want to say that my young friends with the Afghan Peace Volunteers were interpreters too. They were interpreting to people in the United States what it meant to nonviolently try to resist war in their circumstances. I mean, it just comes to mind in 2014, they got all of the little kids from the neighborhood together and they pooled all the toy guns they could possibly get their hands on. And together, the children and the teenagers buried those guns. And then they planted trees over the burial site. That's the kind of thing they did. And they were very clever and creative and passionate and brave.
Prayer is what is something that people can do, I guess, but beyond that.
Well, I know that in Pakistan, for instance, people who have sought refuge are living at very close quarters in mosques, in big marriage halls, in parks, and that's in Islamabad. There will be many people who are going to need to go someplace. And so the more that people can imagine opening up homes, hearts, schools through education, the more we can open ourselves up to the fact that these are brothers and sisters of ours, people who've meant us no harm, but people who, because of our policies and often because of our addictive relationship to weapons that have been used against them, that get more and grotesque all the time, they have suffered deeply. So I believe we should pay reparations, but you don't just pay reparations in money. Reparations can be paid through trying to dismantle the war systems that have made life so miserable for all of the people living in the war zones where we waged wars of choice. They weren't wars of defense. They weren't wars that were unavoidable. They were always wars of choice. We chose it. And I feel funny using the pronoun we, but in a way, people in this country benefited from the economic gains that the US achieved through controlling other people's resources. They weren't our resources, and controlling other people's lands. It's not our land.
Kathy, thank you for your dedication and your service to humankind across the globe, and your laser focus on illuminating the truth and what's really going on and what's important and what the cause and effect is and what it means to real people every day.
Well,
We're grateful.
thank you, Roger. I wonder if I could also encourage contact with the website bankillerdrones.org, because that's one thing. It'll be a longer haul, but why not work for an international treaty to ban these weaponized drones? I mean, the latest version with the Hellfire missiles now can fire missiles that are, I mean, if you can imagine 100 pounds of molten lead landing on your car or your house, and then it's like a lawnmower that it's equipped also with these blades that kind of like a switchblade snap out and then swivel so that a person would be basically chopped. We were so horrified by what happened to Jamal Khashoggi, but people are likewise horrified when their loved ones are attacked with these grotesque weapons. So it's not easy on the people who fire those weapons either. There's great trauma felt by drone operators. And so the other one thing I want to mention is we learned a lot from Daniel Hale, who's now imprisoned for close to a 4-year sentence because he blew the whistle and helped us know that 90% of the times in Operation Haymaker, which was a US airstrike operation in Afghanistan, 90% of the people targeted turned out not to be combatants. They were civilians. So, so much to learn together. Thank you.
Well, again, thank you very much for all you do and continue to do.